All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started for this morning. You'll notice, unfortunately, we don't have subtitles for this presentation today, but we will be posting the recording of this presentation on YouTube, and that will have the subtitles available on there. So for future reference, it will be available later. If you go ahead and take a moment to silence your cell phones for me, I would appreciate that. And today we are welcoming Captain Thomas Thomayer. So retired Columbia River pilot, Captain Thomas N. Thomayer, will share with you his memories of his grandfather, Captain Lewis S. Russell Sr., founder of Tidewater Barge Lines in 1932, and also sharing a lifetime of working on the Columbia, Willamette, and Snake Rivers. Captain Thomayer walked aboard a Tidewater tug for the first time in 1970 and operated them for 17 years. He was voted in as a Columbia River pilot in 1987 and enjoyed working with fellow pilots and masters from all over the world for 27 years. So please welcome Captain Thomas Thomayer.
Thank you. I don't have to press the button to talk. That turns it off. Well, yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the Julia and the Columbia River Maritime Museum for inviting me down to join in the program of a past and present. I'd also like to introduce my grandson, who's my assistant, and he wants to follow Grandpa's footsteps, I guess. But in order to do that, he has to learn about his great-great-grandfather, Lou Russell Sr. So I'm going to start the program out and giving you a little bit of information about why that's up there. And slough pig, you might ask? Well, I learned that I was a slough pig when I was 35 years old. I didn't know that prior to that time. And it was interesting to learn that. And it kind of like shocked me that after looking what a slough pig was, that I was a slough pig. But anyway, I'll let you know how I found that out a little later on. So I'm going to start the program with my grandfather, Lou Russell Sr. And I want to make one thing clear, that he was not a licensed Coast Guard captain, but in my eyes, he was a captain. He ran Tidewater, several companies for years, and you can be a captain, like there's captains of football teams, basketball teams, they all have captains. So I considered him to be a captain of captains, which are all the captains that worked under his supervision to develop and do safe barge, sternwheeler barge, and on the Columbia and Willamette rivers and clear into the Snake River. So let me switch to the next. Just a second. Stand by. Stand by to stand by.
Aha.
Okay.
It's working.
Yay, okay. Anyway, let's review this photograph with Tidewater Barge Lines throughout the brochure, which this was produced by Tidewater in, I'm thinking it was about 1978. Wishes to pay tribute to our founder, the late Lou S. Russell Sr., He was born in 1895 and passed away in 1997, who, along with many others, most instrumental in contributing to the developing the outstanding navigational and transportation operations throughout the Willamette, Columbia, and Snake River systems. Before establishing Tidewater in 1933, Lou Russell worked as a long line mule skinner in Nevada, which he ran mule trains to the mines in Nevada. And then he got moved up to the northwest and around the Dalles area, which he got to work for Consolidated Freightways. So, and before establishing Tidewater in 1933, already mentioned about a mule skinner, and then in 1918 in the truck operation field in 1920 as a superintendent of transportation for Consolidated Freightways in 1930. In 1932, Mr. Russell became interested in the river transportation industry commodities and began renting steam-powered sternwheelers ships to move customer products from port to port. Thus, throughout the ensuing year, Lou Russell set the framework for Tidewater Barge Lines. 10 years later, in 1942, Tidewater Shaver Transportation Company was established, and in 1960, Tidewater became a full-fledged independent tug and barge transportation company under its present name of Tidewater Barge Lines, Incorporated. Through hard work of Lou Russell and his associates, Tidewater now operates a diversified, efficient product transportation system serving the Pacific Northwest on the Willamette, Columbia, and Snake River. So that's a quick lowdown of his history, which this brochure set out. So Tidewater is by far much larger now. I have some copies of this brochure. I'm going to have my grandson pass out. You can take a quick look at the pictures and little things that are involved in this pamphlet, brochure, and give you a better idea what's coming. So I'm going to start now with Shaver Forwarding Company, which was in the 1930s. And there's the view of the office. And you can see the truck loaded with the grain sacks. Those grain sacks weighed about 55, 60 pounds each. So my grandfather got involved trucking to the river and made it into sternwheelers. So Consolidated Freightways joined the Shavers to make this new bound system to work. And on the lower left, you can see one of the trucks loaded. And there's at Lisle, Washington. And then there's a picture of one of the sternwheelers, Beaver, loading wheat at Lisle, Washington in 1932. Okay, this is a picture of one of the envelopes of Shaver Forwarding Company. And it's the red, I can't see it, darn it. The red collar line. And down at the bottom, and see the sternwheeler and the trucks shipped by river freight. Now, I took this picture of the envelope I have from that time, and it's kind of a neat little relic I have. I found it in some of the photographs and paperwork and odds and ends that I ended up after my parents passed away and gave me all, they ended up getting their stuff. And this is how I came up with this program to come up with a presentation. One of the bottlenecks above the Dalles is Slough Falls. Of course, this is presently underwater due to the Dalles Dam, which flooded this. There has been some talk about taking out the Dalles Dam so the natives could have their falls back. And you can see at one point there, right there's a salmon, and very treacherous spot to be fishing, but they did. And anyway, it was a sorrowful time when the Dalles did complete and it flooded those out. And the year that the Dalles did go into, it was 1957 when those falls disappeared. The next photograph we have here, this is what they call Big Eddy. This area right here is the eddy part, and then down here is the lower part of the eddy. But if you see right here, can you guys see that? That's the beginning of the canal, which had two locks in it to get to the river traffic through above the falls. And it was man-made, and it was completed from the period of 1905 to 1915. They built the canal to be able to navigate that stretch of the river. Otherwise, there would be sternwheelers below the falls and sternwheelers above the falls in that period. And there was no way they could navigate that area until the falls were built. This is one of the sternwheelers here in Turning Basin right at the beginning of the canal. I've got to get my paperwork here a little bit more in order. The sternwheeler there is the Ione. And that's all I know about that sternwheeler. I never really looked it up because it wasn't part of the families that Lou Russell had rented or purchased. But they would either wait there or they would turn around and head back down after they dropped off supplies from the lower river. And here is the Umatilla at the Big Eddy Turning Basin. That's the same place that the Ione was. And you can see the wheat sacks, empty wheat sacks they were unloading, or excuse me, not just wheat, it was grain. They had all kinds of grains, that winter wheats and white wheats and red wheats and barley, and those were heavily farmed in this area. And these are actual this is photographs out of a book I put into the program. But most of these pictures are actual black and white photographs that I ended up having. This is the Umatilla at the Dalles. And you can see the bags there that were dropped off by the trucks and manhandled from that point to on the sternwheelers and headed downriver. The Umatilla was one of the sternwheelers that my grandfather ended up with. And when they dismantled the sternwheeler, that wheel was preserved. It ended up with my uncle, Lou Russell Jr. I didn't mention that Lou Russell Sr. had 3 children. James Russell Sr., Lou Russell Jr., and then my mom, Betty Lou Russell. And anyway, this wheel was presented to me from my uncle, Lou Russell Jr., and I had it for several years. And what do you do with a wheel like that? Except stick it over in the corner and your grandkids and daughters, I have 3 daughters, asked me, what are you going to do with that, Dad? Well, right now I'm holding it. And this ended up at the pilot's office in Portland hanging on the wall in the entry. So that's where I decided that wheel would go. Here's this is the Beaver nosed in at Lisle, one of the other stern whalers that ended up in the family. And they've got lumber and bulk products to move. This is in 1932. Another picture. This is the Umatilla at the Dalles in 1934. My grandfather wrote on that picture, so I didn't have to try to find out which stern wheeler and where and what, but that was handy. He had it written on that. You can see all the trucks with barrels, so they were moving petroleum. They would have brought it up from Portland to the Dalles in 55-gallon drums and then take the grain back down to Portland or wherever, Longview. Another picture of this one is this is a Beaver also at Umatilla. This is Shaver Forwarding stern wheeler that was actually at that time was Beaver, which was ended up in my grandfather's ships, stern wheelers. And they're pushing a derrick barge. And you can see by the wake that he's making pretty good time, pretty good speed with that one barge. Stern wheelers are pretty efficient and quite maneuverable. They had rudders behind the paddle wheels, and they had rudders forward of the paddle wheels, so they could steer it either forward or ahead. This is a little bottleneck below Bonneville. I don't know why they were offloading. The only thing I can think of that the river was closed off for navigation when Bonneville was being completed. If you see another style of stern wheeler, but actually that's a side paddler, and that one is was owned by the Oregon Railway and Navigation Corporation, and that's a T.J. Potter, and it was built in 1888. And people getting on and off, and so I don't know what all the story was, but if you look in the background, I don't know if you folks are familiar with around Bonneville, but there's Beacon Rocks right there. Here you have the Beaver, kind of a blurry picture, but you know, this is a long time ago, and cameras weren't all that good. They definitely didn't have cell phones with cameras. So, had to do what they had to do with. So, this is one of the wheels that came from one of the stern wheelers. Not going to elaborate on it, except when this was in a party room at my grandparents' house and sat over in the corner by a fireplace. And my grandparents were quite entertainers. They had their party room had a full bar. It even had a mirror behind the bar, and they also had the brass bar that you put your foot on that on that table, and my sister would spin it. It would turn, and of course we always got in trouble for doing that. But it had been in the family for a long time, and I ended up with it. But right now, it's kind of in a predicament on where this is going to go. So anyway, it's a beautiful table. There is the first sternwheeler that my grandfather actually purchased after he had rented. It's the Undine, and after he had purchased it, he renamed it to Dowels. And after a fashion, the Undine could carry like 600 people, or 450 passengers, and it was 150 feet by 27 feet. And what my grandfather decided to do was to remove most of the house inners, and he put fuel tanks inside of that house. And his idea was to haul bulk product from Portland to the Dalles. And nobody else was doing it. They were doing it in 55-gallon drums. So he was unable to consign with the petroleum companies to move product. So he ended up having to buy it in Portland, and then he'd take it up to the Dalles, and he had established a tank farm there and offload that product. And the system worked quite well, and he made quite a bit of money off of doing that. So he raised the price on fuel, whatever he wanted to do. So anyway, that's in Portland. It looks like it's Christmas because there's a Christmas tree up there somewhere I can't see it, but it's kind of a neat old picture. I've got the original black and white of that. So here it is, renamed the Dalles, going into the Slough Canal there at Big Eddy and pushing a barge. The wheel and the name board, the Undine and the wheel, this is hanging in the pilot house, which is over here on top of the pilot station. There's a rental there the Columbia River pilots have. It's called the Pilot House, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it's right on the waterfront. And you can watch ships come in and out, and the pilot boat going out with pilots and coming back in. And this is the living room of the pilot house. And so I wanted these items that I got from my uncle, Lou Russell Jr., to be in a safe place, and this is where they ended up at. And this is the dowels on the other part of the living room of the pilot house, and you can see the ship right there. And it's right over the water. It's a neat place. Kind of spendy to rent, but it's well worth it. You can watch pilot boats come in, and then when they get docked, and you can hear the people moving around below, which pilots coming in, but you can go downstairs and stand there in the breezeway and meet pilots, which is kind of a handy deal. If they'll talk to you, some of them will, some of them won't. This is this is a shaver tug, Sarah Dixon, and it's up to Willamette someplace, but I don't know any history on that. But it's one of the sternwheelers that Shaver was working with, Tidewater, soon to be Tidewater. And so that's why it's in this album I have. There's the Shaver forwarding sternwheeler with a barge. That's the Dixon again. And that's just below Hood River. It looks like winter to me. I don't know how I figured that out, but kind of a neat old picture. Now we're starting to get into developments of tugs. And this was after the war that Navy surplus was available. So my grandfather uh, was purchasing old ships and tugs, Navy surplus, at a really good deal. So it was making some of those ships into tugs. And the top one is the Louisiana, which was named after, uh, actually, that's the Betty Lou, which is named after my mother. And it's Navy surplus. Um, and the lower one here is the Marjorie, which was built from a bow of a LCI ship, Navy surplus, which LCI stands for Landing Craft Infantry. So we're starting to get in more power, bigger barges. As time progresses, stern wheelers are going to the wayside. Uh, far more efficient to push a barge load than dealing with stern wheelers and people. This is the Dow's Dam before it was completed. And on the stack of that, you can see a TS, which stands for Tidewater Shaver. And that tug is that's the Invader in 1955. Then we have the Al James, same area with a barge. You can see the wheelhouse has now been raised up from the lower configuration. So you can see over the empty barges, and when they're loaded product on them that stacks up, you can see over that. And I get a good view of the dowels. Imagine that photograph is in color. So we're moving along in history here with time. I just threw this in here because it was the Galaxy that was bought by my uncle, which he got, my Lou Russell Sr. brought his son in, Lou Russell Jr., and started put him into starting his own business with Russell Towboat. And he became a major player from that point. And then here's a little, Lou Russell Jr. borrowed some money to buy a barge, which was in the corner there. It said $215 for a barge, and it was going to go up to Maryhill for the ferry before they had the big bridge. Are you guys familiar with the inland layout going east on 84, following the river? Okay, good. Anyway, I found that interesting. So there's another, that was top is James Russell Sr., the oldest son of Lou Russell Sr. He didn't like tugboats. So he ran off and joined the military and joined the Marines and worked up to being a sergeant and made it through the war and came back. But his brother, Lou Russell Jr., renamed the Galaxy tug to James Russell in honor of his brother. And then the tug May was used at Maryhill and Umatilla for part of the ferry boat system they were using before the bridges. That's the James Russell. The house is up. And like I said, that was named after my uncle Lou Russell Sr. or James Russell Sr. I hope I'm not confusing you guys too much, but now we're getting into as the dams are being built and the locks are being completed, the larger barges were being developed. This is Russell Towboat and Moorage, uh, number 22, and that's the Lou Russell Senior. That's a petroleum barge. Then we have the Lou Russell Senior and a sand and gravel barge uh, bound for Bonneville for their powerhouse completion, uh, expanding, I guess it is. Oh, here's the Capitol Press. This is from Albany. They had a Albany Tug and Barge, which is another company under Russell family. And they had a small tank farm up there at Albany. And here's the Lou Russell Sr. and the Marjorie Russell. Marjorie was my Lou Russell Sr.'s, or excuse me, Lou Russell Jr.'s wife, Marjorie. Got named after that. The Russells named tugs after the kids. And that was kind of cool. Over the years, get way out to the end of it. The last one that family tug was named was my sister, the Betty Ann. And that was renamed to Maverick, which the tug is Tidewater has today. And my poor sister, she was upset to beat heck when Ray Hickey changed the name of that boat. And it was quite upsetting. I understand that, but wait a minute. I was next in line. And family sold Tidewater to Ray Hickey, 87 or when it was, but I never got my Tommy tugboat. Okay, so that's a little petroleum barge and little tugboats. That's one of Russell Senior at Albany, alongside a barge pumping off. And there you can see the R on the stack for Russell. I always tell what company they are because they had their initials on the stacks. Well, Slough Falls had some bad things happen. This barge broke loose above the falls. It was tied off around the corner from the falls. Broke loose. I don't know why it broke loose, but it ended up on the falls. And this is 1945. And Inland Navigation, which is owned and operated by La Pilato, decided they weren't going to do anything about that barge, so they collected the insurance payment on that barge, and then I put it up for bids to the company, insurance company, and La Pilato figured nobody was going to bid on that, so they didn't bid on it. But my uncle, Lou Russell Jr., came in with a bid, and he bought that barge sitting on the falls like that. Well, great idea, but what do you do with the barge sitting on the falls? You spend a week trying to get it off, and he did everything in his power to do it, and he couldn't get it off there. So my uncle and my grandfather went to the Corps of Engineers and talked them into releasing water from Grand Coulee to wash that barge off. And by God, it did work. It took 4 days for the water to get down to that barge, and then it got washed off. But what do you do with a barge that's washed off the falls and you got a little tugboat? Well, you go out there and he got hold of it and brought it back to safe berthing. But unfortunately, there were two men on the barge while it was still stuck, and they were put on there when it came off to assist in getting lines to a tug. But they decided when it started coming off, for some reason, they took their shoes off and jumped into the river, and they ended up drowning. Both of them did. But when they got the barge settled down, there's actually the shoes were still right where they left them. This is unfortunate. That's the railroad bridge. It's there today at Slough by the park railroad bridge. Okay, there's an Albany tug. The Albany Barge Lines tug, Lee Russell Sr. Light boat. You can see how high they're getting on these tug wheelhouses, getting right up there. Marygale too, or this is Marygale. One of the tugs that was up on the Upper Columbia River Navigation Company's tug, and the name of the gal, the daughter of the owner, was named that tug Marygale. And when he agreed to selling the tug, actually that company, that tug would remain, a tug would remain with the Marygale on the tug in the agreement, which it did. So here's the Marygale 2. This was after she was rebuilt and powered. Little bit configuration, but more accommodating for the crew as far as quarters. The Al James and this is at I think Umatilla. Let me look at my notes here. The Al James and Defiance at Umatilla, just tied up. This is the Defiance on the ways. These ways were at my grandfather purchased property across from the airport. It's on Six Beach Drive. It was called Russell Towboat Moorage, which they established and built barges and boats, and they built a dry dock out of all that surplus, Navy surplus. And if you see here, there's some Navy surplus right there on standby. And I don't know what was the designation for those, but there it had Russell on it. They would use them, some of the tugs that came from the surplus, and then they would rebuild them. Looking forward to the needs for as the slackwater navigation, it kept getting further up the river with the dams. There's 8 dams, 4 on the Columbia and 4 on the Snake River, to end up to Lewiston for slackwater navigation. And that's talking like 465 miles from here to Lewiston. So that's quite a ways by tugboat. So that's the dry dock in Portland, or the Defiance. Another petroleum barge being pushed up. This is above John Day. That's the Invader. And then we have a Viking. It's just right there. I didn't need to look it up. With the petroleum barge. Looks empty. It is empty. Barges are getting bigger, but those are the smaller ones. There's that LSM, which is a military surplus. And that's a cement barge bound for McNary with the Viking. And so this is below Big Eddy, but in 1949. This is unloading site at the Dalles. It's a LSM, Navy surplus. And it talks about the current right there. It's across and just a little upriver from the canal entrance for Slough Canal. There's looking headed upriver with a cement barge headed. This one's headed for McNary also. You see what they've got to encounter as far as navigating up that river through all them rocks. This is the Invader, one of the more powerful tugs. This is still getting it completed after rebuild. It burned up. They're above Slough Canal. They got it down, and this is how it ended up being rebuilt. Nasty having a fire on a boat. There's a canal. You can see how the narrow it is with a Defiance and a barge. And there's not much room to be messing around in. James Russell pushing a cement barge bound for McNairy. And this is at the upper end of Slough Canal. It's meeting one of the inland boats. Do a little port-to-port passing. We got the James Russell cement barge and going in the lower end of the canal at Slough. And the James Russell is assisting Al James, getting into the locks. Evidently, it's kind of more of a high water situation. Needed a little assistance. And here's another picture of the boat in the canal. That's James Russell there in the canal. Doesn't look very wide, does it? That was all man-made, by the way. Okay, this is the Invader after it burned up. It's a little bit different when we just saw it. But the hull was good. So you just clean up the ash and build a new house. Probably put a new motor in it. This is a Peggy Bill named after my cousin. It's a surplus hull. Doesn't say here. Okay. Anyway, Navy tug. And you can see the tunnel right here on the back end. That doesn't, well, it helps lessen the draft with the propellers tucked up in there rather than hanging below the hull, like most of them are. So they call that tunnel. And they had that one. And then they had the Betty Lou. Whoop. Yeah, the Betty Lou Russell, my mom's boat. So both those hulls are the same size. So when you got two hulls, what do you do to get with them? You throw them together, call it the Betty Lou. This is now a catamaran. In 72, when they're just completing it, rebuilding that tug. So they put the two hulls side by, and they put fuel tank in between them to hold them together. A very maneuverable boat because it was so wide. That's meanwhile back at running the old boats. I think this guy was a little bit nervous about something because he's standing up, leaning on the throttles, looking ahead. So you got the spotting lights right there. The throttles are here. He's got the stick, but that's about all you can see of that. He's got a nice little hat on. And you got, now this guy's an old timer. He just sitting there smoking his pipe. Spotlight right there. Whoop. Spotlight right there. He's got the whistle right there. It's got his pipe and looking up ahead at those rocks, islands. It was those rapids were pretty tough above John Day. It's quite a stretch, and it took a lot of training before they'd let you turn you loose and let you drive a tug up there. This is my dad, and there's no date on it, but just looking out the window, he's got his Navy hat on. And anyway, one of the earlier barges is a 300-ton maximum at Umatilla, where they were loading it. And all the hatches on that had to be lifted off. They were wood. And they were nice size. You could make coffee tables out of those old hatches. They lasted for years. That's a spout. They're at pedal to grade growers, elevator loading it. You just had to move that spout around, keep from piling up on too much on one side, and listen to the barge over. This is down at Longview, and with an LSM, and a leg there dropped down into the center of the barge. There was a sump in the bottom of it. And in the bottom of it, this was a patent that my grandfather came up with, and I believe my uncle was part of it, but augers. So rather than having a crane with a clamshell picking the grain out, they had this leg set up, and the auger in the bottom of the barge at each end would auger the grain to the center, a sump hole. So it became an self-offloading barge. And it was quite an improvement, savings, and it was quite the deal. The only thing I show here is not only was there a little bump on the barge right there, but the Mississippi Jack, before he had winches, he used these jacks like they were like a ratchet, and you'd pull those cables out just as far as you could and get them hooked, and then you'd ratchet to tighten it up so it'd be secure. It'd take quite a long time to put a tow together. This is going to be an endo tow they're putting together here. Is that actually what time it is?
Yep, we got about 5 more minutes, Captain Thomayer. Over
What?
here. About 5 more minutes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, those are bombs being loaded. And more tugs at Umatilla. There's Umatilla. A wood Tidewater shaver tug. This is my grandfather and my grandmother. And my mother's right there's my mom. I was in November of 51, and I was there because I was born in April of 52. So wasn't right out, but I was there. And then there's one of the Liberty ships became a barge called the Arlington. And this is in a pilot house over here above the pilot station in the rental. Wow, I didn't even get to river piloting. That's how I learned how to work on barges. So first tug I got on, I just didn't realize I was taking so long here. So I don't know what to say. Let me whip through this stuff to Wheelhouse, some of the old barge tugs, and the first tug I ran at Bonneville, that's that catamaran. This LCI was made into this tug. The Beulah, my grandmother, higher Wheelhouse, and Captain J.G. Van Ness was made out of an LSM, half of an LSM. That was the queen of the fleet back then. Another LSM style. Leland James was an LSM. They converted it. And then this is an LCI. Leland James Wheelhouse. Leland James 9-foot propellers. That's the motors inside of those at Fairbanks Morris. 10 cylinders, 20 pistons. The Marygill 2 with a high wheelhouse, Snake River. I ran that boat for 5 years. A log barge coming down from Lewiston. Fertilizer barge, that's a seagoing barge headed up to the just below the mouth of the Snake River hedges. Anhydrous ammonia. This Russell family towboat moorage with a whirly crane. That's where I grew up playing. That was my playground when I was a kid. Just running barges through the bridge, narrow bridge. Bonneville coming in with endo tow. You're doing 3 knots. Hopefully you'll get stopped by the time you get to the end of the locks. Frozen there at Bonneville. Problems with people anchored. They don't move. You blow whistles at them. They just wave at you inside the locks with the bigger barges. A piece of a nuclear submarine, a part of the nuclear piece headed to Hanford National Reservation to be buried. Sidle barge, 3,000-ton barge. And there's the auger inside the barge for offloading. Dry dock going through a bridge, tugs, blah, blah, blah. Just kind of pictures, tugs and barges and blah, blahs. And Leland James, Bonnet or Cascade Lock, Tidewater. That was the queen of the fleet right there. Cork nozzles, just like a jet boat pump, same type of situation, an impeller inside of a ring. More efficient than Tidewater's newer tugs, blah, blah. Then we come to Betty Lou, the Maverick that was Betty Ann, my sister. Captain Bob, named after my dad. Now we're getting to the river pilot, which I'm not going to be able to get to. Give me a couple more minutes.
Yep, let's take 2 more minutes and then we'll go to questions.
Okay, we're going to whip through this. So hang on, you guys. Don't blink. How do you get on a ship? Well, that's one configuration. Either the pilot ladder or the combination ladder. But here's the combination of the two on a big old container ship. And about halfway up that sucker, you're kind of tired climbing that ladder. There's a accommodation ladder set up. When you get to wheelhouse, you give the captain this sheet. It's a master pilot exchange. All the information on the ship the captain's supposed to write down, and you're telling him what's going to happen, and when we get to the berth and tugboats and all the arrangements made. This is how I figure I got through most of those years. Well, it's not funny. Some serious stuff, but anyway. So the engine telegraph, the gyro compass. You have to put your courses. All the courses you use are on this. You give rudder commands, and then you give the course, and the quartermaster will steady it up on the course that you give. There's 360 degrees on this thing, 360 courses you can use. There's looking out the window, and you're leaned on the gyro repeater to make sure they aren't varying. In a mile, if you're 1 degree off course, you move over 104 feet from where you wanted to be. That's an old configuration, the steering station with a magnetic compass. And then you see right there, some guy right there. Look at that guy right there. My partner, there's some big ships that would, the Exxon Valdez, I'm sure some of you guys remember that one. Here's Willamette, an outbound bulk carrier and an outbound car carrier. meeting right there at the mouth. Oh, I gotta hurry, you guys. I gotta hurry. So, some more pictures, tankers through the old railroad bridge of St. John's. It could take an hour and a half, maybe more, to get a super tanker through the old bridge. Four tugs on that ship. Then they put the new draw span. Yeah, they're just more ships.
All right, well, I'm going to take it to questions. So let's go ahead and give the captain a round of applause. Captain Thomayer is going to have one of the handheld mics, so it will just be me going around with the second handheld mic. If you do have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll come over to you so that everyone can hear what you have to say.
Can you come back?
What?
Can you come back for the pilot part?
The pilot party?
Yeah. So we got the tugboat part. We want to see the pilot part.
The pilot party?
Yeah, the pilot part.
Oh, the pilot party you came for.
Yeah. Game 4.
I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize that. You're looking at a pilot. I mean, this is what you get as far as the piloting. What can I tell you? If you want to talk to me, I'm going to be here. I can tell you anything you'd like to know. Yes, sir.
In the early days, when you were talking about the transfer from the boats to the trucks, how many of those transfer stops early on before the dams and the locks, where you had to go from truck to boat and then up and then from boat to truck and back and forth? How many of those stops were?
I lost you partway through that, but the transfer of the cargo?
Yes, the cargo that you were bringing, upriver, and you had to stop and offload it at the eddies and put it on the trucks and move it up above the eddy, and then,
Well, usually everything was going down when it was loaded.
okay,
They bring the empty sacks back up the same way they did, but normally they wouldn't have to offload. You load it once, and that stern wheeler would take it all the way to Portland or
Okay.
Longview
okay,
to the docks.
okay. Thank you.
How long did it take a tug to go from here to Lewiston if you went steady and didn't stop for anything? At 450 miles or whatever it was.
Well, it depends on. It depends on if you got a loaded barge. So it's a lot slower, but let's say 24 to 36 to 48 hours, depending. You got lockages, you might have traffic, and if at 465 miles and let's say an average of 10 knots, there you go. But then you got lockage, which takes 25 minutes generally. So I don't know, divide that, and I don't remember because I didn't go up there anymore. So, I left the river 14 years ago since I retired. And I never went up, 27 years before that was when I was on tugs. You kind of forget some things.
It blows my mind how heavy those things are, and you're pushing that with a tug. How do you actually control that?
Rudders. Rudders and power.
It's just a lot of power.
Yeah, steering, tows like that, let's say the ones I just showed were like 14,000 tons, probably average. And these tugs have so much power now and huge rudders that you'd give 10 degrees and it would just start coming slowly. And then once you get her swinging, then you got a counter and you've got a lot of rudder power. The Leland James that had so much rudder power, it could break an endo toe up if you gave it too much power or too much rudder. That's how much they have. I mean, you're snapping cables, 1.5 or 1.25 inch cables. Yeah, that was a dangerous tug because somebody come up but that rudder, all of a sudden, tugs now are 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for the line hauls, and then they have harbor tugs that's just a day job. But Tidewater's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and Shaver's 1 week on. I think that's what they're doing. So, yeah, you live two lives when you're tugboating. I mean, when you walk out the door with your bag going to get on a tug for 2 weeks, and you say goodbye to your wife, everything's different for her and different for you. Back when you didn't have cell phones, you'd wait until you get to a dock to use the telephone, and then they'd have to beat the captain there because he would get to the phone first, always. So anyway, this day and age with go FaceTime, you can see your wife, and it helps. But it's a tough life tugboat. You know, takes a special person and family that's committed to being away for that time. And then they want you to work over. You're just getting ready to get off and they call you, you don't have a relief.
All right. Well, before we thank Captain Thomayer again for his time, I do want to let you know that we have 2 more presentations for the Past to Present lecture series. Next week is February 10th, and we'll be joined by Laura Laforti and Lavita Gilmore Jones. They're coming from the Vanport Mosaic, and they're going to be talking about the history of Vanport and sharing the stories of the descendants from that city. The week after that is our final presentation, and that will be on the 17th with Olive Theodore. She's the founder of Walrus Boat Recycling and looks into sustainable boat practices and reusing derelict vessels for alternative purposes. I'm sure Captain Thomayer is happy to stick around for a few more minutes if you have other questions. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here and have a great rest of your day.
Definitely. Thank you again. I left you guys hanging about